Here we are right here with this two-door Lt1 10-speed Jeep. He doesn't have the best flowing grill. I think he's going to correct that, but we haven't been running hot, so that's a good sign. It's about 100 degrees out here. Let's take a look under the hood real quick. You can hear that Camaro fan spinning up, but it's only about 50%. It's about a 100-degree day out here, and we just went up that long trail. We got a K&N filter, the Motec battery tray. We got an S-Pod in this one. There's our new, not new, there's the valance that you'll be getting with the Lt1. And yes, the battery tray is also included. See how much room we got here? Let me show you guys a little trick. I noticed that the air conditioning was cold, but it wasn't blowing a lot of volume. So this guy had an air filter in here, and the later model JKs come with this. I don't think the early ones did. I think he put it in. And basically you just remove your glove box like this. It's hard to do with one hand. And it's back there. Check that evaporator. We noticed that, in fact, this guy's missing his screen. It looks like he modified it. There's usually a screen over that. And then we find napkins and mail and everything else plugging that screen. The later model JKs did have a filter. So keep that area clean. And when I remove this filter, the volume of this air conditioning pretty much doubled. And that's going to help our little drone here, because on a 100-degree day, he runs pretty hot. But that's a magnesium case, and it's used for cooling the drone. So having this air conditioning keeps the drone going. Wanted to reiterate one more time that even though this vehicle is 450 to 500 horsepower, the cam is so mild that you can almost count the exhaust pulses. We're sitting here at about 475, 490 RPM right in there. And that's pretty amazing if you consider that this engine has such good low end drivability and the economy that it gets. This morning we're in an Lt1 10-speed, and I often talk about how mild the Lt1 is, and it is. We're sitting here at just over 500 RPM, air conditioning on. It's kind of a hot day. It's not quite 100 yet, but if I let the brake off, just watch how slow. This is with the brake off. You can see it barely goes, and sometimes you got to give it gas. Well, let me give it gas and let's get going here. So one of the real benefits of the Lt1 is you end up getting similar horsepower to the last generation of high horsepower crate motors, like the 480 horse LS3 or the 475 horse Hemi 6.4. But those engines are dependent more on a lower compression ratio with a bigger cam that produces high RPM horsepower. This engine is more about torque and low RPM through technology. It's using continuous variable valve timing and high compression. When I say high compression, this engine's running 11.5 to 1 compression, and just tapping on the throttle makes this thing go. And when you combine it with a 10-speed, it's almost seamless. It's just like an electric motor that keeps pulling. It's a different sensation, and after you get used to it, you really don't want to go back. The end result is the Lt1 is just fun to drive. It's not like your V6 where you're just trying to keep up with traffic. You know, it's a mundane drive going from here to there. It's just got so much bottom and power and torque that a little bit of throttle, everything in front of you gets closer and everything behind you gets further away. And it's not like you have to try. And then when you let the gas off, you just watch those revs come down. And I think this one's cruising at about 2,000 RPM, maybe a little bit less at 80 miles an hour. And that's fantastic. Being able to cruise in the teens at 80 miles an hour means you're going to get better economy. The driving experience is better. It's just a better driving vehicle. So this video is going to be an extension of the last video, which was the affordable 5.3 LT swap. And when I say an affordable build, we're not talking about a budget build where we strip it down and we're not giving you heavy-duty cooling, drive shafts, etc. We're going to be including everything that you need to make your JK fully functional. Now, if you have special needs, like you're going to be crawling in 120-degree temperatures with 42-inch tires, of course you're going to need auxiliary cooling. And there's other options like Aeroforce gauges, Banks gauges, things like that we offer that are optional. But the basic build, the affordable build, includes most everything you need. I guess we should call it the value build. So if you look at the 5.3 LT build, it pretty much has as much power as you need for the average JK. Now, if you want to go out and you want a hot rod, you want to show off, you want to go to a show and open your hood, well, the 5.3 might not be the most glamorous engine. But the 5.3 LT has more than a respectable amount of power and can easily haul most JKs. Like anything else, you guys with 40-inch tires up in the Colorado Pass towing a trailer that weighs 4,000 pounds at 13,000 feet are going to say, well, I took my 5.3 LT up there and it had to downshift. Well, yeah, of course, things like that are going to happen. But for the average guy, the 5.3 LT has enough power. The 6.2 LT, on the other hand, probably has more power than you need. The fear of merging into traffic with 40s are over. In fact, now you got to let off because whoever's in front of you probably isn't going as fast as you want to go. As you can see, cruising up the Parkway at over 70 miles an hour, under 2,000 RPM, is very relaxing. It's very quiet, very smooth. It's just a completely different environment. In fact, I was driving a Mercedes GL not long ago, and it was the supercharged 5-liter, and it had about 400 or 500 horsepower, and it was really fast, of course. It felt like a luxury car inside, and it's just not something I'd probably want to take off-road, but I would say that this kind of compares in that driving experience, having that 500 horsepower supercharged Mercedes. So let's talk a little bit about the Lt1 build versus the 5.3 build, because they are a little bit different. So on the Lt1, they have a different oil pan that runs an external oil cooler. And what we do is we run a rail cooler on the engine oil. So we put anywhere from a 14 to about a 23-inch extruded aluminum cooler along the driver rail, and we tuck it up under the frame, next to the frame, so it's pretty much out of harm's way. We've been doing this for a couple of years, and to date we still haven't had one leak. We've had some damaged, mostly maybe a nick on a fin here and there, but we've never actually had one fail. So I think it's a pretty secure option. Now, we also offer that same option for the transmission on the passenger side. So if you have larger tires, and when I say larger tires, anything over about 35 inches, I think you should get additional transmission cooling. As far as the transmission cooler goes, on the Pentastar JKs, we run the Pentastar cooler. On the non-Pentastar JKs, a lot of you guys have already had overheating problems with your transmission, so Mopar has addressed that with an auxiliary transmission cooler. One of the things that we do is we ditch the AC condenser with a trans cooler in the bottom because it's pretty pathetic behind the bumper. It doesn't get a lot of airflow, and Jeep had problems with it. So we'll go with a full-size 20 to 30,000 BTU cooler. We like the B&Ms, we also like some of the Haydens, but it just depends on your setup. One of the critical things, though, is, guys, please don't block the grill. And I know we talk about this in almost every video, but we're getting a lot of vehicles in with winches that aren't sunk and bumpers that are covering the grill and reduced size opening grills. And if you're going to run a big fire-breathing V8, please make sure that you have airflow through your grill. Also make sure that you have airflow out of the engine compartment. The last couple of builds we did had pretty much solid fender liners, top to bottom, side to side, front to rear, and there was just no place for this hot air to go. So don't do that either. And I think you'll notice that the trend in the manufacturers, and I've been looking at them all, Poison Spider, Metal Cloak, they're all starting to vent those fender liners, and I think they learned that dirt intrusion or mud is important, but so is the engine breathing. So a lot of them are venting them now, and if you have the older style where they're pretty much solid, just take them off, vent them with some louvers or some holes. I notice a lot of them are using screen mesh, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter as long as that air can go through it. So the Lt1 build is going to include a brand new crate 460 horsepower Lt1 production engine, and that's important. It's a production engine. As you know, the LS3 is now more of a GM performance engine than it is a production engine, and you get economies, you get more stuff with the production engine, the manifolds, the spark plug wires, everything is there because these engines are built on an assembly line right along the same engines that are put into the production vehicles. And they know that these engines have to last because they have to warranty these vehicles, so in some way I think these engines are also built to a higher standard. So you get more stuff, you get a quality engine, and you get a guarantee. And the reality is the Lt1 has dropped and dropped and dropped in price because GM's cranking them out, and it's not only become one of the most popular engines in the sports car lineup for GM, but it's also becoming one of the most popular aftermarket engines. It's supplanting the LS3 and the small block and everything else that came before it. And there's no reason that it wouldn't, because the LT1 has no downside. It's milder than most of those engines, has more horsepower than most of those engines, and it has better transmissions than most of those engines. Plus, it gets better economy. So it's just win-win all the way around. So the Lt1 Build is going to be just over 30 grand. I'm going to say most guys are going to be in the 31 to 32 range, and there has to be a variance there because the early JKs versus the late JKs, like 15 and up, we have to unlock some of the modules, and that costs several $100s. The early JKs, as discussed, don't have a proper transmission cooler, so we have to add a transmission cooler. And then, of course, all the interferences, the guys with the dual S-pods and dual air compressors and rock lights, and you know, most of my customers do have pimped out Jeeps, full skid plates, so there's going to be some variance there. But the bottom line is you're going to be in the really low 30s, and if you consider what you're getting, I do believe a Hemi now is in the mid to high 30s at most places, if not pushing $40,000. You're not getting continuous variable valve timing, you're not getting an 11.5 to 1 compression engine, you're just not getting any of the technology in these new direct injected LTs. So it's a heck of a value, and we're not going to be skimping, like I said, on the items that you need. Heavy duty drive shafts, heavy duty cooling. We're going to make sure we wrap the exhaust, which used to be an extra cost item. We're just going to do the things that we need to do, or that we know we need to do, to make your Jeep survive, not only out here in the Southwest, but if you get up there in the North. We get a lot of customers up in Canada, where it tends to get pretty cold, so there's other things we have to do to take care of that. So you get the new Crate Lt1 production engine, and let me say something about the horsepower rating. Even though it's rated at about 460 horsepower, I think that's misleading, because peak horsepower, while it is an important number, doesn't reflect the torque. And one of the things about the Lt1, and most of the LTs in general, is that they produce that torque just about off idle all the way up to the red line. So you're not waiting to 4,000 RPM to be putting out 400 foot-pounds of torque. I think you're putting out close to 300 foot-pounds of torque under 2,000 RPM. So when you take a 460 horsepower engine with a torque curve that's flat as a dinner plate, and you put it up against a 500 horsepower engine, they're going to be neck and neck. If not, the engine with the more torque might win. An old NASCAR guy once told me, torque gets you there and horsepower keeps you there. And that's kind of true. The next thing is going to be the transmission. I get the call almost every day, what do I want, the 8-speed or the 10-speed? And we'll talk about it one more time. They're both excellent transmissions. The 8-speed had a rocky start, but the 8-speed is also an 8L90, which means it's good for close to 800 foot-pounds of torque. If you're going to go out and beat your Jeep up, I think you should get the 8-speed. The 8-speed has come a long, long way. The new 19 operating systems and an 8-speed is just a dream. In fact, I get into these things and I sometimes don't know if it's an 8-speed or a 10-speed because they're that similar in the way they shift. Where is the 10-speed going to have an advantage? Well, the 10-speed, having a couple of more gears means that if you have really large tires, let's say you have 42-inch tires and you want to gear tall, which is what these LTs like. You don't want to short gear these LTs. You might have a little bit better launch off the line, but then other guys might say, well, it's shifting too much. I remember a while back I was driving an 8-speed Dodge truck and the thing was constantly shifting, and I have a 9-speed Chrysler Pacifica, and it shifts quite a bit too. So some guys might complain that, well, the 10-speed just shifts too much. If you gear properly, it really doesn't. It shifts too much mostly when you got 35s with 538s or 513s. This is way, way too much gear for an LT. And the LT needs to be loaded down. It's like a monster that wants to be unleashed, and if you don't load it down, it's just freewheeling. So you want to load these things down. I've got guys out there with 37s and 373s and 37s and 410s, and they don't really have any problem launching off the line, and then they have the benefit of that low RPM cruising on the highway and the better fuel economy. So be prepared to re-gear if you've got the traditional 513s or 538s with 37s. So you get the Lt1 crate motor, you get the 8 or the 10 speed new transmission. Now remember, most of the transmissions we were getting for the LSs, while GM says their new transmissions are really remanufactured, because the 6L80 production pretty much ended a while ago, and they just got cores and rebuilt them, and yeah, they're still good transmissions, but they're not brand new. where most of these 8 speeds and 10 speeds are. But we purchased them directly from GM, so you're getting the GM warranty. So let me tell you some of the things that we put into the LT1. The accessories are pretty much new. The only thing that we reuse is the power steering pump if you have a late model JK. With the LT1, we can support the PSC pump or the Pentastar pump. So if you have a Pentastar JK, we can reuse it. A lot of guys have PSC hydraulics, so that's not a problem. If you have an early model JK, then we get you a new Pentastar JK pump. So other than the power steering pump, the accessory drive is all new. New compressor, new alternator, belt, tensioners, all that stuff. As you know, our earlier billet drive was geared around the JK drive, so you can reuse all that stuff. All your accessories, power steering pump, alternator, air compressor, tensioner, all that was reused. But with the LTs, everything's new except maybe the power steering pump. We were going to wrap the exhaust system with heat tape, which used to be an option, but now it's standard, because like I said, we don't want to nickel and dime guys. We want to see guys out there enjoying their Jeeps rather than worrying about having to upgrade it. So you're going to get the heavy duty cooling, and that's going to include our quad header radiator. It has 2 header panels on each side to support the tubes. And over almost 300 units sold, I think we've had 2 or 3 leak. And you know, that's close to 1% versus if you look at most of the other companies out there, they're averaging 10, 20, 30% over a year to 2 of use. And that's because the JK tears these things up. The JK body flexes and aluminum doesn't like to flex. For years we tried to make the radiator stiffer and stronger and the tubes thicker, but really all we were doing is designing a better brick. So by going to the quad header radiator, which supports the tubes at 4 points instead of 2, then removing all the straps and gussets and everything else, it allows the core to flex like the factory JK core. The factory JK core is made out of a pretty soft aluminum, and then they crimp with rubber seals plastic tanks on. So that setup is pretty flexible, and that's what we tried to mimic. You're also going to get the Camaro Ss Fan. This is a fan that can pull easily 3,000 plus CFM, or cubic feet per minute, which is much more than the early JK fan, and I'm going to say a little bit more than the Pentastar. The problem with the Pentastar fan, and a lot of guys want to run it, is it's just controlled terrible. It's a negative coefficient 10 hertz pulse width fan. And I don't know why Jeep went to it, but it's very odd in the automotive world to run a fan like that. Even the new JL and JT went to the 100 hertz positive. The new Camaro SS Camaros are all 100 hertz positive. So the Camaro SS fan is quieter, more powerful, and it integrates perfectly into the GM system. Yes, we have integrated the Pentastar fan into the GM system. However, the results are mixed, because even Chrysler had mixed results with their Pentastar fans in the JK, just doing crazy things like winding up when the engine's cold and slowing down when the engine's hot. So the GM fan controlled by the GM operating system means that things like vehicle speed, air intake temp, transmission temp, AC condenser pressure, of course coolant temp, all this stuff is going to come into play, and then it's going to make the right decisions. I had a customer that did a swap with us back in about 2011. That's 10 years ago, and he was running the stock JK fan, and he lives in Junction, Colorado, Grand Junction, and he goes up to the 10, 11, 12,000 foot passes, towing the 3,000 to 4,000 foot trailer with 37-inch tires. And recently he upgraded to all of our cooling stuff, meaning he went to a rear transmission cooler. You can see how this LT1 idles just under 500 RPM here. It's very relaxing. Put 12 gallons in it, and it filled it up from just below a quarter. Sometimes I forget these 2-doors have smaller gas tanks, but with this LT1, this guy should get pretty reasonable economy, even with these, I think they're 37s, it might be 35s, I'm not sure. But let's get back to the guy in Colorado towing a 4,000-pound trailer over the 13,000 foot passes with a 10-year-old build. So he fitted the rear transmission cooler, the side cooler, engine oil cooler, which is all off-boarding the heat out of the engine compartment and into the atmosphere. And he said that on his average trip he would have to stop 2 to 3 times on the hotter days to let the vehicle cool down. Well, with all this extra cooling, he says that he was able to make the trip non-stop, and the numbers are pretty darn good. I don't think the transmission hit 200 degrees and the engine maybe 230, which is fully acceptable for an LS. He has an L94. Now, I do remember about 7-8 years ago he was doing that trip. He blew a heater hose. This is an L94 all aluminum engine. When he brought it in, and he said, yeah, I just couldn't get over in time going up the pass, and the engine hit 300 degrees. That's the hottest I have experienced an engine get in my career. And he wanted a block test or a hydrocarbon test to see if he blew a head gasket, and we did one and it was negative. So the engine survived, and all these years later that engine's still going strong. So it just goes to show the durability of the ELS. But as time goes by, the LT is proving to be more solid, better performance, better economy. And I think what GM did is they took kind of a big step to go to the LT from the LS. When they went from the small block to the first LS, that was a pretty big step, because we were really going from 1950s technology to 1990s technology. And pretty much the Gen 4 LS was an evolution of the Gen 3 LS. Yeah, they added variable valve timing, which was discrete, it wasn't continuous. The engines featured flex fuel and some other things. There was even some intake valve tuning engines, but pretty much it was just an evolution of the Gen 3. When they went from the Gen 4 to the Gen 5, they introduced some radical technology. Direct injection, while not radical technology, it's been around for a long time, for a mainstream overhead valve production V8 engine, was pretty significant. Yeah, Ford had run it, and the Europeans were running it in their little 2-liter engines, 3-liter engines, and of course diesels run pretty trick fuel injection. But for the average Silverado that has a baseline 5.3 engine, direct injection, continuous variable valve timing, active fuel management, and now dynamic fuel management, these were pretty significant changes. And I think it took a little while for the technology to mature and get rationalized. But now that it has, we're seeing the full benefits of it. We're seeing engines that idle at 500 RPM that put out the same power as a 500 horsepower Crate Hemi or Crate LS3. So I know this video is getting long. Let me try to speed it up. The Lt1 Build is going to be in the low 30s. And by the way, guys, there also is going to be a builder package if you want to install it yourself that will be offered, and you can call for details, or we'll get the prices up on the website soon. But you're going to be in the really low 30s. I'm going to say starting at 31 and probably ending at 33, depending on the little options we talked about. You're getting the new Lt1 production engine, the new 8 or 10 speed production transmission. It's your choice. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. You're getting heavy duty cooling. You're getting a full new exhaust system that's wrapped. You're getting the engine oil cooler. You're getting the Motec battery tray, which cleans things up. You're getting the Motec upper valance, which helps seal the radiator, and it looks pretty trick. You're getting a new AC condenser that flows better air. Of course, you're getting the entire turnkey build and then the test drive. And some of my test drives can go, usually it's no less than 200 miles, but some of them can go up to 1,000 miles. Some of the extra cost options that many of you will be interested in is the Atlas transfer case, which is an excellent transfer case. We are finding that the Atlas 2 standard holds up. There's the Motec Atlas that Advanced Adapters offers, and it's pre-configured for our swap, so there's no vehicle speed sensor. It runs the sight tube, so you know how much oil is in it. We got it set up and dialed in for our conversion. And that's going to give you a twin stick, so you can have two-wheel drive low and front-wheel drive and all the other options, or let's say you wanted rear-wheel drive low to negotiate switchback trails and not have to fight the steering wheel. The Atlas 2 is a good option, and you're running in the low to mid 3,000s for that, 3,200 to 3,500, depending on some of the options. And of course, guys, everything else. If you want axles, we support Dynatrac, Dana, most of the major brands. But the bottom line is, you're going to be paying in the really low 30s for a state-of-the-art V8 engine conversion that has no compromise, and in my opinion has no equal, because even though there are many other powertrain combinations out there. So we're going to take this two-door JK to the mountain, and we will see you soon. We got a lot of builds in the shops.